How's it going, guys? This is Chris Reed, Director of Program Design over at Tatum Human Performance. Now, we already talked about all the different athleticism metrics that we take when we do team assessments. We also talked about why they're important, right? We take a linear speed test to see how fast you can run in one direction versus a change direction test to see how you can accelerate laterally, decelerate, change direction. So we already know the importance of all those, but what do the numbers mean? So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what's called norms. Now, for each and every test, the 5-10-5, the linear speed, the grip strength, the vertical jump, all of our tests come with norms. Okay, a norm is basically a set standard for where we want your athlete to be at a certain time frame in their life. The way we do norms are separated by sex, so male, female, and then also by age. And the way we do our norms are 12 and under have their own set of norms, 13 to 15, okay, 16 to 17, and then 18 to 29. The reason we do that is because 12 and under, they normally can fit within the same style of norms, and their goals are normally to just learn the fundamentals of the sport and kind of get better at the fundamental movements in the gym, right? Once we get the 13 to 15-year-old range, right, 8th, 9th, even 10th grade, then we start to have a lot more sport specificity. And so we see those norms tighten up and get a little bit harder to reach until we get to our 16 to 17-year-olds who are thinking about going D1, right, going on to the next level. So their norms are even harder to reach. And then once you get to the 18 to 29-year-old bracket, those are our pro athletes, right? So they should be matching the norms for pro athletes. So let's get into what an actual norm is, and we'll give you some examples. So for instance, the 5-10-5 drill, that is a deceleration, acceleration test laterally, and with that test, we get a number. Okay, so a lot of people maybe would go a 4.8, meaning 4.8 seconds to go 5 yards to your right, 10 yards to your left, and then another 5 to your right. But what does that mean, and how good is that? That's where the norm comes in. So for our 18 to 29-year-olds, regardless of sport, just with sex and age, we're gonna set that norm at about 4.7 or 4.8 seconds. Okay, within that, if you go underneath that norm, so let's say it's 4.8 seconds for your age group, and you go 4.6, congratulations, you're actually above the norm. You can go faster than what is the optimal norm for that age group, right? But if you go at 5.1, you're a little on the slow side compared to that norm. Now, when you compare it to maybe the age group below you, 16, 17s, you might actually be right where they need to be, but if you're above that age group, 18 to 29, then you may have some work to do there. So why do we even use them? We use them to identify what are you really good at above the norms, and what are you not so good at that we can exploit and work out and try to find that opportunity, right? So if someone is really good running linear speed, forward, backward, but not so good going left to right, then we're gonna work on left to right to open up that portion of their game as long as their sport demands it. So with that said, we have norms set for every single athleticism metric that we had. So our vertical jump has different norms, and even on some of the norms, we can get more sport specific. Okay, so before we talk about that, let's talk about what are the 3 tests within our athleticism metrics that actually can be not sport specific, that can go across all different sports. So those 3 are our vertical jump, our 5-10-5, and our linear speed. Okay, with linear speed, that's just showing how much force we can put into the ground and how much of a reciprocal pattern we can make going forward, right? And that results in speed, right? Speed kills, no matter what sport you're in. Even in a sport like golf, if you have a higher linear speed score, or in this one, a better linear speed score, meaning lower, then you're gonna have a lot more power in your lower body. So that tells me as a golfer, you may be able to have a higher clubhead speed, right? So it's a linear speed test, which you don't run in golf, but it still can translate. Okay, same with vertical jump. If we're sticking with the golf example, vertical jump is a lot of force down into the ground. Linear speed's working this way, vertical jump's working this way. If you think about a golf swing, a baseball swing, a tennis swing, anything like that, we're gonna go ahead and have a downward force component in that. So if our vertical jump is higher, that means we have a better threshold to push down into the ground. Now on top of that, we also have our 5-10-5. So going into, let's say, a different sport, maybe lacrosse or volleyball, we're gonna show lateral movement left and right. And if we can load this hip, then we have a better ability to actually get in and out of that 5-10-5. A lower score is gonna be better here, right? But how does that translate to a different sport? Like baseball, right? Can I load into my swing, right? So even though I'm not running when I'm in the batter's box, I still use that skill to get into this side and get out of that side. So if I can get in and out a lot faster, I'm gonna have a better score on 5-10-5, and I may actually have a better ability to rotate and hit the baseball pretty far. Now, let's move on to something more sport specific. So at THP, we use the total athlete score, which is those 3 tests, and we kind of make a summation as to, how is your athleticism as a whole, just looking at those 3 screens. So when we have teams that want to go a little bit deeper than that, we can actually create an athleticism score that is sport specific. So the 3 easy examples we have are golf, lacrosse, and volleyball. So you know that we already have vertical jump, 5, 10, 5, and linear speed. With those 3, we add on other sport specific screens. So for volleyball, attack, block, height, reach, vertical jump. Again, we're going to do some different variations there that are more specific to the sport. Okay, for lacrosse, we're going to focus on reaction time, 3-yard burst, 5-yard burst, a TPI test where we do a shot put to see what your shot could actually end up coming out at. And then with golf, we'll look at club head speed, right? We'll look at club head speed, ball speed, smash factor, those type of things. So those individual metrics can make it a lot more sport specific. And again, every single metric, no matter what, the 3-yard burst, the 5-yard burst, the reaction time, everything's going to have a norm to it to the best of our ability. And we gather our norms from national databases, and then we've taken over thousands and thousands of data points here at THP. So our norms are pretty concrete, and they're set in a pretty small window that they're not going to change that much, because we know what you need to be successful at that sport. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the metrics that go into it. We've talked about how they change per sport based on what the team needs, and how you get to see where you're at, whether you're at the norm, maybe a little bit below the norm, or a little too far below the norm for our liking, where we want to actually kind of really focus on that area. What does it look like to the athlete? So the athlete, instead of having to know all the norms and do some calculations themselves, they're just going to see a box with all their metrics, and it's going to be green, yellow, or red. Okay, green means they are at or above the norm. So say vertical jump, the norm is 28 inches for an 18-year-old male. Okay, if he jumps 31, then we know he's 3 inches above the norm. Is that something we're going to focus on in training? Probably not. We're probably going to make sure that he maintains that, but that's not something we need to really drill in, right? So if we go a little bit farther down and maybe we find out his 5-10-5 is flashing yellow, okay, it's supposed to be a 4.8, but he's a 4.95, maybe that's something we're going to key in and work on. So from the athlete or parent's perspective, they just need to be able to see, okay, every single metric, where am I green, where am I good, where am I yellow, which is it's an average, above average, or where am I red, where I really need to work on these specific things. So anything that pops up red, we're going to make sure we're working on that for that specific athlete. And if a team pops up with a lot of yellow, a lot of red, those are going to be the things we focus on in their training. So we use these norms to drive our training decisions in the same way that we use the test to identify what are the needs of the team. So when we take a team, and let's say it's a lacrosse specific team, we're going to take all the norms that we laid out, all of our normal athleticism norms, and then the lacrosse specific, so the 3-yard, the 5-yard, the reaction time, and we're going to go ahead and weight those out. So it's going to be one big master equation. Luckily, we don't have to do all this math with pen and paper. We have a system that can just do it. We punch in their numbers, it spits out the score. So with this, you take every single metric laid out and you say, this is the norm for every metric. This is where the athlete actually scored at. So, if the norm is 28, they scored at 27, they're at about 95% capacity, right? Whereas if they scored above it, they'd be over 100. We add all those together after dividing the recorded norm versus the optimal norm, and then we add all those together and see what it is as a whole. So that gives us a really gross view of overall for lacrosse, let's say, their athleticism is here, right? Now that's one way to look at it and one way to identify, okay, I've got some work to do, but where does that work lie? That's going into the details and seeing each individual metric, where are those red and green boxes. So overall, we take a ton of data at THP and it helps us drive our training decisions, but we want to make sure that we're taking the data that actually matters, right? So if 5-10-5 is nowhere existed in your sport or any type of movement like that, probably not going to test it because it's not relevant to you. But once we find those relevant metrics, we'll set an optimal norm for all of our age groups. We'll punch in those numbers, and that's going to help drive exactly what we do and exactly what you see on the training floor.